I want to consider how much choice there really is. Is the choice illusory, or do new regimes have to deal with the situation that is around them, the basic constraints in dealing with other nations? Would you, for example, knowing that Cuba was 90 miles away from Miami, 90 miles away from an aggressive superpower that is broadcasting propaganda into Cuba, introduce censorship? Would you introduce state police as a way of preventing the removal of independence from Cuba? Because it seems to me that these are the questions that are going to have to be faced by nations that are struggling not only to overthrow their rulers, but to be independent as a nation from Western powers afterwards.
Well, Cuba's a very special case, so I mean, to some extent it has characteristics like other small countries, but it is unique. For 50 years, the United States has been dedicated to strangling and crushing Cuba.
Yep.
And Kennedy's Latin American advisor said the problem is the Castro idea of taking matters into your own hands, which might lead others in similar circumstances to try to follow that path, and pretty soon the whole system of U.S. control would erode. So for those reasons which persist, the United States has carried out, first of all, a massive terror campaign. Cuba's been the victim of more terror than probably the whole world combined in international terror. And beyond that, economic strangulation of an extraordinary sort.
If you are a population that wants to be independent, that wants an independent state, we might talk about other forms of independence later, but an independent state in defiance of NATO, or if you're near China, in defiance of China, or Russia for some of the former Soviet states, then it comes at a cost. And in the case of Cuba, perhaps that cost is that you're in a state of war. Being in a state of war,
you look around the world, there are similar problems, but not as dire as the one that Cuba faces. So go a little bit to the south, South America. One of the most dramatic and important developments of the past decade is that South America, for the first time since the European conquerors came, for the first time in 500 years, has made a very significant move towards independence, towards integration. There isn't a single U.S. military base left in South America, which is pretty remarkable.
What do you think, Tariq?
Well, I think that over the last decades, the most significant changes we've seen have come from South America. I mean, I visited Venezuela, Bolivia, Brazil, and the mood is just different. And many people say it's the first time ever we feel really independent, that whatever the weaknesses might be of these regimes, and there are some, they are sovereign states, and they act as such. And when Chavez, for instance, says something to the United States, he's very blunt and open about it. And he told me once, he said, you know, I gave a speech in the UN, and a lot of other countries who can't say this in public come and congratulate me and say, thank you, you're speaking for all of us. And he says, I say to them, but you can speak too. No one can stop you, but, you know, the condition...
Well, they obviously think they can't speak.
They think they can't. And this is now a mode in most of South America, I mean, with the exception of Colombia, Mexico, and partially Chile. Elsewhere, people are feeling we're independent for the first time ever. I think this is going to be a huge problem for the United States. I mean, they're obsessed with the Arab world and China and now Iran. But in South America, for a decade, or a bit more, the United States is not in control.
It worries them enormously. In fact, the National Security Council, top planning organization, warned that if we cannot control Latin America, how are we going to impose a successful order on the rest of the world, meaning rule the rest of the world? So if we can't control even our backyard, how are we going to control everything else?